times when I look at people and I see nothing worth liking. I want to earn enough money I can get away from everyone.
What will you do about your boy?
I don't know.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where today we continue our exploration of Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Roca. I'm a writer, producer, and host on the Outlaw Nation, and here co-host and voiceover guy as well. And I'm excited to be pulling out a milkshake and getting back into There Will Be Blood. I'm ready.
And I am excited to welcome back to our microphones Emmy award-winning sound editor Jonathan Greber. Welcome back to the Cine-Files.
Thanks for having me back. I can't wait to wrap this one up.
Me too. And before we jump in, I just have one question because I've been editing our previous part, and I realized there was something that I thought I was 100% sure about, and now I'm not 100% sure about.
Ooh.
My question is, who is HW? Where did he come from? What is his relationship to Daniel?
Well, we can't know anything more than knowing that he was presumably the child of a man who Daniel hired to mine for silver.
Right.
Okay. That's what I thought too. But then as we were talking about it in our previous part, it almost seemed like there was some ambiguity, or well, obviously there's ambiguity, but more than like there was some mention of like maybe it could have actually been Daniel's biological son. And which isn't what I think, but I was curious if that was what either of you think.
I think one of you suggested that, which kind of blew my mind. I thought that was a cool kind of possibility. We just don't know. You know, I mean, but I like to assume there's a bit of Machiavellian opportunism of him snatching the child as his to use for his business efforts. But, you know, I guess it could be his boy.
What's so funny is I, of course, always assumed that it was just this random guy's kid that was working on the rig who died. But then I was suddenly going, oh, we don't know. There's no speaking. We don't know anything.
Right.
And we certainly don't know where mom is.
Right.
Okay. I just wanted to kind of bring that up before we jump back in. Where we left off, Daniel Plainview had just totally publicly disrespected Eli while not allowing him to bless the derrick. And now we're heading down to a celebration where all the community is gathered. There's music, kids are playing, there's food. And Daniel Plainview talks to Mary. And in this very sort of sweet scene at first, is asking her if her dad still hits her, and he's not going to. And he says, I'll take care of you.
No more hitting, right? No more hitting. Go and play some more. Don't come back.
And then the camera moves, and we realize that Dad has been sitting next to them this whole time.
Yeah.
What the hell's happening in this scene?
I think this is a power move, honestly. And this is like, he's almost angry at the old man for having birthed that son. And so in a way, he's kind of going back at Eli Sunday's dad and, making sure that he understands that he is now the power in this town, not Eli, not anything related to Eli, and just kind of reaffirming who the hell he is. At least that's what I thought.
Absolutely. And it's just yet another example of the competition that is Daniel Plainview. It's just another opportunity because the leverage is really high right now. It's really high. The derrick's there, and he capitalizes on that because he knows he can. And Dad just can't do anything but sit there and take it.
Yeah, exactly. And you can tell the look on his face too. He's like,
I have two other questions because that's exactly what I think too. I totally agree. Does he care about Mary at all?
I think in his mind he does. I think that's a kind of the warped perception he is, because like you said, he's so driven to achieve that he thinks he has the regular human emotions that everyone else does, but as we see later on when his brother, quote unquote brother, shows up, there is this real dearth of emotional connection to anybody remotely connected to his life. And so I think he doesn't understand that he's using Mary in that moment, because he thinks he's doing something good. He thinks he's doing the right thing by kind of going back at this guy and going back, in essence, at the elders of the town to stop abusing these young children in their town.
Totally agree. Exactly.
There's a thing, I don't know quite how to put it. Sometimes humans can harness negative aspects of their personalities to do good things. You know, like you have a big ego and you want to be the center of attention, and then you build a hospital where you're the hero, but your motivation might have been negative, but the thing you did was positive. And I think there are times where that's true of Daniel Plainview to some degree. The other question I would put out, I don't expect an answer, but I kind of want to think about it as we move forward. Who was Daniel Plainview's father? And what was he like?
You're a little obsessed with the family stuff today. This is an interesting part of this part 2 stuff. I would imagine that he was a cold man. He was a distant man. John, I don't know what you think, but that's the feeling I have, and maybe died young as well.
Yeah, I mean, before I go to the father thing, I just had this sort of thought of like, you know, the does he care about Mary? And that question, I kind of see Daniel viewing his life as almost a game field, a football field. In every advancement, there's opportunities. Like you can do well here, you can knock the guy down, or you can move forward, or you might be pushed back. But I almost think he sees in a not maybe psychopathological way or antisocial way. He just sees everything as an opportunity, and yeah, he's gonna choose to look good all the time if he can. Like, no more hitting, because it's easy for him in the moment. He knows it is. It's a win. It makes people like him more. At least it makes someone like him more.
Yeah,
and he sees that he can win that. And I just see that as just another competition. So I think he's just. Does he care about Mary? Sure. Yeah, on some level he does, but not enough to really do anything about it if it was going to, be detrimental to him.
Yeah.
As far as his father, I can only see someone like Daniel Plainview, but horribly, horribly worse. That's just what it feels like to me.
Yeah. And maybe not as successful, not as driven.
Right.
You know
And he resents that. And he's going to show him, and he's going to succeed.
I think 100%. I think his father is a failure. I think his father was a drunk, and I think his father beat him.
Yeah.
And I don't think his father died young, because when Henry shows up, and we'll get to this, he tells him our father died. So, So his father, and the reason I think this is important is Daniel Plainview is a self-made man who left, I think, fairly young from his father and probably from a not so good situation. What's really interesting, and it's such a weird transition, is we see at this party, Daniel takes a big swig from his flask, and then we cut to, it looks like he's passed out face down on the floor. So this is our first indication that this guy can get his drink on, in a serious way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's woken up by his right-hand man that someone has died in the well.
Yeah.
And we hear kind of the description, and then we see how it happens. And it's just so awful. Similar to the way that H.W.'s father died.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And they're dragging out the body. And by the way, it seems pretty clear, someone dying on these jobs, this is not a terribly unusual occurrence.
Right, sure.
And we open up kind of the box, obviously this guy's possessions, and there is that white paper cross in there, that this is the person that Eli's people blessed when they came to the well the first time. And then we're at the church. And the design of this space is so cool. There's slats so that the light from outside is shining in. And by the way, technically, this is sort of difficult because there's a lot of spaces in this movie where we're inside, but we're lit from the outside by natural light. And this is not something that generally just happens. Like, you have to get a lot of light inside the space to balance out the sun, or you're adding extra sunlight because if you think about, let's say it was a whole day shoot or 2 days shooting in this church, well, the sun is moving. So and
Right.
the shadows are going to be entirely different places if you have sun blasting through these slats. So you have to continually be adjusting your lights to make it look like the sun is in the exact same spot.
Jesus.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying even though you're using lighting, you're also using the sun, and because the sun is moving, you have to dynamically adjust your lighting.
Exactly.
That sounds like a nightmare. He sure does it well, though, doesn't he?
Well, because if you think of you're in a space with these slats and the light is coming through the
Yeah,
slats,
it's
you're
gonna
going to
move.
and you're going to have shadows everywhere.
Yeah.
But that's not actually what we see. And we get to watch Eli. We've watched Daniel Plainview do his work, and now we get to watch Eli do his work.
Mm.
What do you think of Paul Dano's performance in this sequence?
For me, nothing less than absolutely insane, almost disturbing the first time I saw
It is.
and almost repellent the first time I saw it, and then I just fell in love with him as an actor. He leaves everything there and is, I don't know, it's just crazy to me how effective he is.
The build is so perfect.
And it moved down into my stomach. And my stomach spoke in a whisper, not a shout.
Because he starts off so soft and so tender, and he goes to this woman.
Touch this woman with your hands and caress her.
And she has arthritis in her hands, and he touches her hands, and he's so gentle.
Now, I will not cast this ghost out with a fever, for the new spirit inside me has shown me I have a new way to communicate.
I agree. I think his performance is astounding because you see as if something takes over his body.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is the game, isn't it? He's an early evangelist. This is the game. You've got to show them what the coming of the Spirit does to you. And then what you see in those churches is people imitating that same thing so they can feel connected, whether they're inducing it through their own mind. Like sometimes you can be very influenced to do these things so you can feel part of a group. But he is essentially showing how he's different than everybody else because he's able to kind of feel this power of God in such a obvious way,
Does he feel the power of God?
Hell no. I don't think he feels the power of God at all.
I almost feel like there's a pretty equal line here that you can draw from Daniel to him. The same thing. Maybe he does a little bit, or he thinks he does a little bit, but that, to John's point, that kind of becomes beside the point. He's too far gone. He's too far in. Yeah, he's got to convince himself that he feels God's word because he has to get what he needs to get. Similar, slightly, I think, to Daniel. It's just pathetic almost watching it, but really impressive too at the same time.
Roka, you've been on stage sometimes,
Yes.
I'm sure, where you were acting. Obviously, but did you feel real stuff?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Did you feel taken over by the spirit of what was in the scene?
No, but there is a thing that happens that when you're really dialed in, you've done your work correctly, and you're feeling the connection with everyone else on stage, you can forget that you're in front of an audience. That has happened for sure. And I think one of the most incredible moments was when we were doing, back in college, we were doing The Crucible, and Tituba was late to the stage by like 5 minutes. So we essentially were improvising Arthur Miller on stage, and to cover up the fact that the actress hadn't shown up yet for her entrance. So we were all of a sudden, we were thrown into a boat in the middle of the sea, and we needed each other to survive. So in that moment, I forgot there was audience. I forgot there was a stage. We were just so focused on each other. And all of a sudden, this kind of electricity happened on a night where we didn't anticipate electricity in that scene. And it was incredible. So yeah, those are those things that when you feel it, you just go with it. Yeah.
So I think Eli is feeling stuff.
Okay.
What he believes about what he's feeling is a different sort of question. But I think he does feel taken over by the improv. Let's not say by the spirit, but let's say by the acting. He feels a lot of emotions, and his parishioners say they've been healed. If they didn't believe that they had been healed, his flock would not be growing.
Right.
And again, I think it goes to Daniel harnesses some of his negative things for good. I think Eli might be an atheist, but he also, part of him is believing his own bullshit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because there's evidence to it.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we should mention is who is watching this performance but Daniel Plainview.
Yes. Now, I've got a question for you, Steve. Do you think Daniel Plainview is jealous as he watches Eli? Or does he see, like, how can I say this correctly? Sometimes in the Schmodown, which is what a movie trivia competition I do, when I see the young bucks come in and try to imitate what we do and we're so good at what we do, it frustrates me. It angers me, especially if they have an audience. Then I go, wait, why are people liking this? This is it's so easy to see through it. But what you don't understand is when you're watching it, that person is touching something or clicking or checking the boxes for these people, and they like the way they do it. So when I'm watching Daniel here in this scene, this last time getting ready for the podcast, I thought to myself, is he jealous? Or does he think this guy's beneath him and he's angry that he's being threatened in a way by this guy's power in the church?
I kind of go back to something that I said in the first part when he first recognizes Eli for what he is, of, don't bullshit a bullshitter.
Right.
I think he is watching this performance. Well, I think two things. One is I think he goes, man, this guy is really doing it.
Right.
He's really going there. And I think two is, again, the Daniel's bullshit is in the service of a good because he is bringing in wealth, actually something real.
Right.
This guy's bullshit is in the service of bullshit,
Of himself. Yeah.
of himself, and by the way, the as Eli starts to get quote unquote taken over by the spirit, the dialogue, the things he is saying.
You will be cast up and thrown in the dirt and thrust back to perdition.
And the way his body moves, it's almost a dance.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, we see that he practices this,
And as long as I have teeth, I will bite you. And if I have no teeth, I will gum you. And as long as I have fists, I will bash you. Now get out of here! Get out of here, dust!
Well, for a second, though, to interrupt you, Steve, what is that? Those words he's saying, I don't know. Is this actually from the Bible, or is this his own creation? Because please tell me it's his own creation.
I don't know the answer for certain, but I think a lot of this is his own creation.
I will gum you.
Yeah, I don't remember.
God.
I'm not a biblical scholar, but I don't remember anything about gumming.
I don't either.
Well, what's so weird about some of these faith, and this was, and to some degree continues to be a real thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like things like this. And what's weird to me is the connection between the Christian evangelical faith healer and the Native American or, the shaman, and also there's all sorts of charlatans throughout history, who will, remove an eel from someone's body and say, this is what was causing you the pain. And they do all this sleight of hand and stuff. And here's the thing is the placebo effect is real. It is not a bullshit thing. And if you go through this intense emotional thing and see that this person is moved by God, your arthritis does probably feel better. He just drives towards the entrance to the church and casts out whatever demon this is.
And it left!
And I love the way it's shot because he kind of goes by Daniel Plainview, but who's in the frame, but not important in the frame.
Mm-hmm.
And then he comes back in, and then we stay on Daniel Plainview, and we just sort of, again, Paul Thomas Anderson does stuff you're not supposed to do, which is we see little bits of Eli's hands, but not the whole thing. Normally, that's a no-no in cinematography because it's like, well, I either want to show this person or don't show them. It's weird to show just a little piece of them coming in and out of frame.
Eli, tragedy at the well last night.
Yes, I heard.
Joe Gunder was a man of considerable faith, so if you wish to say a few words, his burial's at noon tomorrow.
it's interesting to me that he is now really almost in back-to-back scenes, giving him the opportunity to do the thing he denied him the opportunity to do just a few scenes ago, which is to say a prayer.
Daniel, this accident could have been avoided.
Stick it in. Stick the knife in. Twist it.
And then they proceed to essentially talk over each other.
Terrible to think
Yes,
of
it
that
could have.
well
These men
working
working
away up
12-hour
there
shifts and they need their
unblessed.
rest. If they don't have it, they start to make stories.
I've seen some of the men drinking.
Plainview is kind of talking about working double shifts, and he's talking about the practical aspects of the accident and the well and what it means to the community. And Eli is talking about the spiritual aspects and what that means to the community.
Don't you think
We
that
need
has
these
something to
men
do
well
with it?
rested to bring in this well. They can't get that if they're up here listening to your gospel, and then the well can't produce and blow gold.
I
all
wish
over
I
the
had
place.
more time with Joe Gunda. More could have been done.
And they really never hear each other at all in this scene.
This is a dick measuring contest. That's why they talk over each other. It's about like, no, you're not gonna tell me. I'm gonna. And so it's a battle for power. And so dudes do this all the fucking time. Dudes will absolutely get into this kind of battle about who's yelling the loudest because that person is apparently the most right. And so you're trying to get the last word and you're trying to get that other person to back down. So it happens all the time.
I love too that Plainview keeps going back to the money that he is bringing to the town, which is the story he has told himself, even though maybe he's not really going to deliver on that. But I love how he says it.
And then the well can produce and blow gold all over the place.
And he repeats that phrase. Why do you think he keeps hitting this point of blowing gold to Eli? I'll tell you. You want me to tell you my answer?
Yeah.
Because I think what he's saying is, I know you're full of shit. I know you're only interested in the money. I am telling you the one thing that you actually want. Don't waste my time with the stuff I know you don't believe in.
And because that was how they got connected at that meeting at the table, right? It was like, I want the $5,000. I want 10,000. You know,
And
so he
also
knows.
the money from the well fuels the economy of the town, reduces the problems. It all feeds into Eli's he's basically saying, yeah, Steve, what you're saying is shut up and let's just figure out some way to just connect here so that we can both be profitable. It's almost like he's tossing him a bit of an olive branch and he's like, okay, let's work together a little bit. Something like that, but it's never going to happen.
Well, but you know what it is? I think that's totally right. And I think, you know what it is that what he's saying is, just come to me without the God bullshit.
Right.
And then we'll be cool and I will accept it, what's going on. And Eli is saying the only way for us to deal is through the God stuff. I won't call it the God bullshit. And so both of them are in an impasse. But I mean, the reality is if they just, again, I think I said in the last part, if they just said, hey, let's work together.
Yeah.
They would both totally get what they want.
Yeah.
Then we don't have a 3-hour movie. But yeah, absolutely.
Fair point.
I mean, it's right there for both of them to work together, but each one of them wants to be the one that dictates the terms of the relationship. And that's the downfall of this relationship.
Yeah.
I love the end of the scene, which is that we talk about the fact that they're going to build a new church because the congregation is growing, which is Eli's way of saying, I am succeeding, you know? And Daniel's last line was,
one goddamn hell of a show.
there's so much in that line because we have the blasphemy that he's saying in the church, and he calls it a show.
A show, yeah. You call it a show, that's all you need to say. Yeah, you're right. It's almost like he's picking his words so carefully. I don't think he is. I think he's just speaking because that's who he really is, but it's super offensive. Super offensive.
Oh, yeah. As we mentioned before, if you're a supporter on Patreon, sometimes you have an opportunity to ask some questions right in our episode. And this question comes from Matthew Gramlich, who says, there is something really charismatic about Daniel Plainview, despite his terrifying self-interest. A lot of attention is given to what a bad dude he is. So I'm curious, what, if anything, you admire about him?
I'll go first if you don't mind. I admire his single-minded determination to achieve success. I know we vilify those people and rightfully so a lot of the time, but there's also a bit of admiration that you're able to kind of extricate any other complications, relationships, what have you, out of your life if it doesn't serve you getting to that ultimate goal. And so I envy that as someone who's striving to succeed myself. I envy that kind of single-minded determination to achieve. So I love that. And there's a power in him that a lot of people don't have. There's no questioning in Daniel Plainview. He's very clear about what he wants to do and where he wants to go, and there's no indecision. And I appreciate that myself personally.
I would look at him and say he's willing to do things I would never be willing to do. Forget about the time. I don't live in 1892 or whatever, but going yourself to dig a hole in the ground to try to find silver with all of the issues that surround that, having a gun on your back because you're likely to be attacked and killed. And if you do find silver, he's willing to sit out there in the cold, fall in the pit, break his leg. He's willing to do all this because he has to succeed. I don't think I'm capable of that. I'd be like, fuck it. What else can I do in this life? You know what I mean? And so I admire that in a way, but I don't admire it like, man, I wish I could be that way. It's like, wow, you are a specific kind of human being. And there's a lot of, we need them and in certain forms for progress. But at what cost, gentlemen, I ask you?
Well, that's the big thing. I mean, I think Daniel Plainview is filled, maybe the majority of his qualities are admirable qualities. He is incredibly disciplined, hardworking, physically, emotionally, and mentally tough.
Yeah.
He is determined. He is brilliant. He deals with adversity. He overcomes adversity. He continues to drive forward. He doesn't quit. Like all of those are qualities that are admirable. It's the motivation, and it is the ruthlessness, and it is the sociopathic drive towards success that is the problem. But if you remove that, then this is a hero,
Right. Like he's not looking to destroy people. He's not looking to hurt people. He's really not looking for anything else but self, focused success and, greed, which is fine. And ultimately, it's interesting to wonder if he didn't run into an Eli type or something like that, how would his life unfolded? Probably exactly the same at the bottom of a bottle, lying on the ground somewhere. But it's just like he's sort of empty. He's got all this great stuff and nothing actually else. Nothing actually. What does he think about to himself? Yet just about his business and his next success. I don't see him as having anything else there to tap.
Well, yeah, and that's a great point you make, John. I was recently watching The Irishman again, and I know nobody runs to watch a 4-hour movie again.
What season?
That's a good one. I like that. I haven't heard that one. But yeah, I was watching it over 3 nights. I just was in the mood to watch it, and I broke it up over 3 nights, an hour or something. And it struck me like this whole story, you're seeing these people who are badass in the prime, de-aged to the prime of their lives, doing the things that they're doing. And in the end, you end up with a fucked up foot sitting in a nursing home waiting for pudding. Or you're throwing the ball, bocce balls or whatever there in prison. You're like, what was the point of it all? Do you know what I'm saying? You rode high in the world, but in the end, you're by yourself. Your daughter won't talk to you. Your wife is dead. Your friends are dying themselves. And it's like, what was the whole point of it? If you can't have some kind of peace at the end, and these guys aren't in peace. And I think Plainview will never be at peace because he had never addressed those demons inside of himself. And I think you're right. Success or failure, he would have ended up at the bottom of a bottle, sitting there pathetically on the bowling alley floor.
I know we spent a lot of time on this question, but for me, I think the critical thing and the critical moment, which is about to happen, it's all about HW. If he has HW in his life, I think Eli is a passing irritant. Because we asked this question at the beginning: does he love HW? How does he feel about him? Right. More and more I go, I think he does love him, and I think it is his shutting down of that love that sends him on the into the worst possible timeline. That's what I think. It's dawn. It's later, and Daniel is spying on the construction of the new church, and then we see Eli practicing his moves, man, in front of the pulpit. And I tell you, know, as a performer, I practice my moves.
Yeah.
You know,
There's nothing
that's
wrong
what you
with that.
do.
Yeah.
And we're at the well, and we've sort of reached the turning point of the film.
But I mean, hold on. Just
Okay.
you saying that, just that fact, the practicing the moves, it really is an exposure of Eli. It really is. It kind of tells you all. I mean, what godful preacher would ever do that? Ever. Like, you would never do that, right? Like, if you really had the power of God, and you just knew, you would know. You would have to just know, well, I'm just going to do my thing and it's going to happen. Practicing it is almost an affront to that idea, like, in my opinion. And maybe I'm reading it wrong, but to me, it's a huge tell for Eli.
I think it absolutely is, but I also think, you know, priests throughout history have practiced their moves.
Yeah, I guess.
You know,
They practice their
well, not
sermons,
just-
at least. Yeah.
Well, and like you think of the Catholic Church, and it's a big show. I mean, there's all this ritual, there's music, there's timing.
Is that
there's
commentary I'm
processions.
saying on the entire Catholic Church? No.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
I think that goes for any religion, right?
Exactly,
Any religion.
exactly.
Yeah, not just the Catholic Church. Yeah.
I mean, John and I, you know, like, you don't think the rabbi went and practiced his moves? Of course he did.
Man, I would hate to sit in on that. That sounds like the most boring thing you could ever sit on, as a rabbi practicing their moves. But I digress. Sorry for interrupting.
Well, remember in Footloose when she walks in on him practicing his sermon, right? Laurie Singer walks in on John Lithgow. He is practicing his sermon. He's doing the slamming of the hand at a certain moment. He's wailing, and she catches him when he does this thing.
Are you guys fans of that movie?
I love that. The original?
Oh
yeah.
my God, I hate that movie.
What? How can you hate
so
Footloose?
much.
Who hates Footloose?
Me,
John.
this guy right here. Much to my wife and son's chagrin, I just cannot deal with that movie.
What?
I have not seen that movie since probably 1990.
I think a great
but
challenge would be to have John back on the show for
Please,
Footloose.
oh no!
So we're working on the drill, and there is a rumble, and someone starts to yell, and HW is sort of perched above the drill, and suddenly there is the explosion as gas flies out. It hits HW, he gets thrown, hits the ground, and you see him grab his face in his head. And this is the turning point right here at this moment. There's a gusher of oil. He and Fletcher, they climb up to the roof where HW is not quite unconscious. And we go into this moment where the sound becomes very subjective. And for the first time on the Cine-Files, we have a professional sound person. I wanted to ask you, what is the process in terms of creating a moment like this? What are you preparing in terms of going into the mix? Is it handled differently from other kinds of moments you might be working on?
Well, I mean, I think for something like this, you know, we did work on this at Skywalker, and Chris Scarabozio is the sound designer. He's fantastic. I can only imagine. I've never asked him about this specific situation, but generally, these are kind of the big moments, and I'm sure you guys know this too from your experience, where you're going to have a chat with the director beforehand, and like it's kind of like, okay, you know, we need to convey the fact that he's going deaf from this moment, and of course, sound. I mean, you know, Sound of Metal. Like, was Sound of Metal a great movie? It was pretty good, but like the whole, oh, the sound is so great is very easy because that is what the movie's about, and to be able to play with, can he hear? Is it good or bad? Those things are pretty easy to do. But in this, it was very complicated, very convoluted and scene. But I'm sure the goal, Paul is not like, oh, now do this, then do this, then do this. I'm sure he said, like, make me believe he went deaf and make it, you know, interesting. And so that was really what he did, playing with, you know, him on the thing in his ear and what he can hear. But that would be a sound design moment. That's what we would call that. That's really like, so the sound designer, I think we chatted about this last time, maybe we didn't. You know, they're going to be in charge of these signature sounds. So if a guy has a sword made of light and it goes in the Star Wars movies, like, what does that sound like? Those things are the most important things for the sound designer to tackle first with the director before the editors start working, before all this. Like, yes, I like that. This could have been, if there is a scene in the movie, this is the scene that would have been the one to check out. So it's like a sound design moment is what I would call it.
I don't think people realize is that when you're doing sound for a film, you're gathering all of these layers of sound. It's not just like one sound or two sounds or three sounds. It could be hundreds of things that are going on, and that you have, multiple things that are the ambience sounds. Like you might have the wind, the sound of the machinery, all these things that to build up, or the sound of crickets and the sound of distant traffic or whatever it is to build up that sound. You have all the layers of Foley, which is the footsteps and fabric moves. You have all that sound. You have the dialogue. You have, and my guess is that when this moment was done, they had the elements to do it realistically in the mix. You know what I mean? And then you adjust.
Oh, yeah.
What? Yeah.
Absolutely. And you also have the element of no sound. I mean, that's another thing that you can use, like in the Thriller movie where they're looking around the house and all of a sudden you're like, where's the room tone? Like they've killed everything. That's when the jump scare is coming in like a half a second to remove all the sound and put it back in. But in this, so what they would be looking at would be, okay, so the gusher happens. That itself, what is it breaking? Is it breaking dirt and ground? So we're going to have some, whatever that sound of that is. And then this of the actual oil coming. When it hits the wood part of this, there's that wood kind of cracking and splitting and flying. Then there's all that. And then there's impacts of the body and things like that. And the residual liquid sounding drips. All of this stuff is usually prepared by the editors, as best they can. And they're going to try to come up with, this is how I like hearing it in my room. And then the mixer comes in and says, okay, well, I think we need more of this. And they carve it out to be the most graceful example of that moment. And, a big deal there is don't just keep adding things. That's never the path to success. In fact, the path to success a lot is removal of things. So there's someone here, I can't remember who said it. It's like, remove all the sounds that you don't absolutely need, and then you might find it. Remove all those things that are in the way of actually what this emotional thing needs to be. So that's the mix process is where it really gets whittled, and then where the director and the picture editor go, yep. And then we move on to the next scene.
Yeah, and in a case like this, it could be incredibly musical, really.
Yeah.
That there's this frequency is going to pop out at this moment, and that has some, like there's some grinding sound or something that has an emotional response.
Yeah.
I think this is handled really beautifully.
Yeah, me too.
I also wonder what he's saying, Paul Thomas Anderson, by switching our point of view to the child, right? In this moment, having everything go deaf, having everything go silent, having, Daniel cover his ears or whatever, like we're hearing it through his eyes. We're experiencing the deafness or the shock of the deafness through the child's point of view. And I wonder if, Steve, as you said, this is the turning point. It feels like we've gone through the looking glass out to the other side. Like this is the new reality now, the new dimension, the new universe we're going into. We were in this universe, we understood it. Now we've gone through some portal to another universe, and we see what's going to happen for Plainview going forward because of what happened to his child, HW here.
100%.
It's interesting. Well, sorry to interrupt, Steve. It's just, as a father, the most horrifying way you could shoot this would be Daniel, if I'm the father, of just staying on me, the father, because that's the horror here, is seeing your son go through something and you can't help him. Switching to HW is really interesting because it does feel like there's some, because we're not in his perspective ever. This is it. And so why are we in his perspective for this? I'd never thought about that before.
Well, I think while Daniel Plainview might have complicated feelings about the reality of his love for HW, and might on some level have convinced himself that he doesn't love him, even though I think he does. For HW, there's no ambiguity. He loves his father. Right. His father is a fucking hero.
Right.
His father is a truly great man. And you think about the intimacy of his relationship with his dad. They go everywhere together. And so dad is coming to rescue me.
Right.
My hero is coming. And in this moment, they're covered in oil. By the way, the oil is made apparently from a very similar kind of oil that McDonald's uses to make their milkshakes.
Yeah.
That's ironic.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little.
And what they had to do, and these are the weird things you do making movies, is they had to come up with different formulations of the oil to do different jobs. Like, how viscous is it? How well does it go through the air? How well does it stick on skin or stick on metal or stick on other things? And so they had to continually reformulate in order to make this all work. Which I think is funny. And they used tens of thousands of gallons of this milkshake oil in order to pull all this stuff off. The music is very percussive and very, again, dissonant. Daniel picks up HW and he carries him away, and we stay with him as he runs across away from the derrick.
What a shot.
Amazing and exhausting, by the way. HW is not a small kid, and to run holding a kid and maybe do more than one take, that's a lot.
You're safe now. I've got you here. You're safe. Let go.
And HW won't let go of him.
Tell me where it is. Tell me where it is. Tell me where it is. Did you see this? No.
And HW says,
I can hear my voice.
Were you hit in the head? Were you hit in the head? Tell me. You have to tell me if you were.
I can hear my voice.
and we know immediately what's gone on. And as he's dealing with his son, in the background, we see the derrick, and we see it explode into flame. So they only have one shot at this. They had one derrick, they burnt it once. So anytime you see a shot where there is the fire in the background, that's when they shot it. So they had, so now we have, so they had multiple cameras of the derrick going up in flames, and one of them is in this, inside the mess hall or whatever, in this really intimate moment with the derrick in the foreground. So you're the kid and you're Daniel Day-Lewis acting out this moment, knowing this huge explosion is going to happen. And if you don't get this scene right in this take, that's it. You can't do it. You can't ever do this again.
Wow.
Well, I also think it's important to note that we've been talking the whole, so far, the first part and a half, about Daniel's actual feelings, right? Connection. And there is genuine, and John, I'm sure you can speak to this, and Steve as well, there's a genuine father reaction here where he's like in between, he's in tears almost, and he's like, out of his mind and checking with him. Is you hitting head? Are you okay? Tell me now. Blah, blah. He's trying to get this situation. He's trying to find out what's going on with his child. And I think if he was really a full-on sociopath, I don't think he'd care. Because, but the fact that he does shows that there is a heart inside of all this madness of Daniel Plainview. He does really care for HW. And I think the symbolism here when he runs back and that thing is on fire. By the way, the cinematography, Jesus Christ, it's gorgeous here. But the explosion, that's the explosion of their relationship. It's foreshadowing what's going to happen here and how Daniel will essentially set it all on fire and burn it to the ground.
Because let's be real for a second. There is a clear path to keep. Well, I don't want to spoil anything, but to
we spoil everything.
Continuing to live with your deaf son as a rich oil magnate. There's worse realities in life. Like people do this. And the fact of what's about to happen, that it happens, that's the net. That tells you there is no discussion after that for me.
Right. So obviously burning this oil derrick was a big deal. And so they had to do some tests to see what it was going to, so they built some things to test it out. And one day they built a fairly big one, lit it on fire, huge amount of smoke went up. A couple of miles away, another movie shoot had to cancel their whole day of shooting because there was so much smoke in the background. And that's No Country for Old Men. Had to shut down for a day because they were testing this. And here's the thing. So they really burned this. They had one shot at it. That meant every shot they needed, they had to get while this thing was burning. Yeah. And they had initially this idea that they would be able to put it out and then relight it the next day. And then as it starts burning, they realized, no, that's not going to work. And so I don't know how long they shot. They might have shot 20 straight hours just trying to get every single thing they could get while this thing was burning. Yeah. And one of the things that happens is if you watch it, you'll notice that the daylight doesn't match. That sometimes it's more daylight, then it's dark, then it's daylight again. It's because they're just running around like crazy trying to get all their shots while this thing's burning in the background.
I love that. I love that so much because it's the antithesis to Marvel movies, which I know you guys are working on how you're going to integrate, and I have a lot to say. I have a lot that I don't like about a lot of them, and part of it is this. There's no stakes. there's no stakes for the filmmaking there. Everything's on green screen and CG, and yeah, not to digress too much, but the fact that they have this real actual limitation, and that it's not actually a limitation, it's a benefit. It's so much better that it's actually happening and driving these performances and stuff. It just takes just a different thing. These are not the same things like the Paul Thomas Anderson productions and a Marvel film. And I think it's worth just understanding that as someone who loves film and watches film. These are not the same kind of thing. You're looking at something that is almost part a play in a way. You know what I mean? With constrictions of that. So I appreciate you bringing that point up, Steve.
Can we also discuss the music?
Oh, yeah.
The music is almost tribal, right? The drum beat, and it's like this thing is happening here. It's almost like an offering to the gods, a sacrifice of an offering to the gods. And maybe this is the sacrifice of his last human connection, which is his son, is what it leads to the success of Daniel Plainview. Yeah. Ultimately, he's had to burn this relationship to the ground in order to, so it's just, and of course, as we do on the show, maybe I'm reading into it too much, who knows, but this is such a great music cue. And I've thought the whole time as I'm watching it, and he maniacally laughs as it's burning to the ground, which is a really weird reaction. And he's almost picking up Kieran Hines going, "What are you so miserable? I got an ocean of oil underneath our feet." So it's almost like it's not even a tragedy to him. It's almost something that he's excited about in some strange way.
Right.
And another part of this, Stephen, and Steve and John, I wonder what you guys think. All of a sudden, after he screws Eli, somebody dies. This thing goes up in flames. Is this a little bit of espionage by Eli Sunday's fervent religious followers? When you work with people who are this dedicated to you in terms of the religion. And remember, this is what Daniel wanted to stop them doing, was to getting close to his workers, indoctrinating them in the religion. Maybe there was something here that was done in the background to make sure this happened.
Okay. I never, ever in my life have had that thought. I can't think of any reason why it's not possible.
Right.
I don't know that there's any level that Eli wouldn't stoop to get what he's trying to get. I don't know. Wow.
That's interesting. And I thought you were going to say, is this sort of actual religious? Is this actually an act of God? Is it like an affront? I don't know. There's a lot of stuff here. I think the way I always thought of it is shit happens. Shit happens in these situations, especially when you're dealing with no safety precautions, no nothing. And I just sort of see it as this shit happened. But man, that's an interesting thing to think about, both of those things.
Well, and another part of this, when you mentioned, John, as you say it, the religion, in the Bible, when God appears, sometimes he appears in the Old Testament as a pillar of fire.
That's a great point.
Wow. Right? When you're looking at this, it looks like a pillar of fire. And the fact that Daniel is the one that stands back and watches them light the dynamite to stop the fire completely, it's almost mirroring this relationship between him and Eli. That he is going to put out this religious fire.
So let's just take that pillar of fire moment. Is because as I said, I think this is the turning point in the film. And I think let's say that there is a God and this is a sign, and this is him telling Daniel Plainview something. This is his opportunity to choose his son over the well.
Right.
That's the opportunity he has right now. And in this moment, it is so painful, is he peels himself away from HW and says, "Wait here for me."
You wait here. I'm gonna take care of you. Wait. Stay here. Stay here, son. I'm gonna fix this.
Don't leave.
It's gonna be fine. You wait for me here. Hold it down. Hold it down.
And that moment is so painful. And what's terrible about it is I don't know what I would do. This is a really scary disaster that's happening, and Daniel Plainview probably is the only one that can solve it.
Right.
And are you going to walk away from your kid and they're most vulnerable? And
you have responsibilities. I'd have done exactly what he did. You make sure someone is there with him and run off and make sure. Okay. That's where you guys are dads, and I'm
just remembering when I was. I mean, my kid is 16, driving around cussing like a sailor now, so it's a little different. But when he was young and vulnerable, and I had that feeling where I had to protect him and I had to make sure he was okay, it was a very real feeling for me all the time. I don't know why, it just was. And so I would like to think that I would take him with me. But regardless of whether this is God intervening or not, I do think that your point of this is the moment. This is the moment you make the decision how the rest of your life is going to go. He makes it, and he makes it, and then we find out about that decision soon after.
Yeah.
But he does go out, as you said, the cinematography is beautiful. The light of the fire, the smoke, all of it looks absolutely amazing. And now Daniel takes charge, you know? By the way, one thing that I found funny is when they did do reverse shots after the fire was done, Paul Thomas Anderson lit them with like flamethrowers. Like normally when you do fire is you get a little flicker light that's electric that creates the illusion of fire, but he wanted real fire. so he's got like flamethrowers bursting in front of them. So when they're like kind of red-faced and squinting, it's because it's really fucking hot.
Jesus.
I expect no less.
Also, by the way, this movie, strangely enough, was carbon neutral, which means they had to find ways to offset all of the carbon they put into the air making it.
Oh my God, that is funny.
And the derrick starts to fall down. And by the way, they realized suddenly that it was probably going to fall on its own. And they had it hooked up to a crane. There's a wire going to it. And so they went, if we don't pull this thing down right now in the direction we want it to go, it could fall anywhere.
Right.
And so they went, we got to pull it down. They pulled it down. Again, this is all live happening.
HW okay? Oh, he isn't.
But he doesn't go to him. He could go to him at this moment.
Right.
And then we see them loading up some dynamite. And I think the first time you see this, you're like, what the hell are they doing? And they put dynamite into these metal drums and they put it up right into the fire. And the way they set up the shot, it's like a 1-point perspective, which means it's two lines that meet at a point. And the point is the fire where the explosion is going to be.
Right.
But Daniel Plainview's positioning is directly in the center of that 1-point perspective. So it's a really formal looking shot. And there's an explosion and the fire goes out.
Puts out the pillar of fire.
Yeah. And then you cut to, I think, maybe the most loving shot in the movie. Him cradling HW, both covered in oil. And HW is like making these noises. And he's whispering, "Can you hear me?" And HW makes noises and he keeps saying, "That's enough."
It just dawned on me that it's very possible. I mean, it's possible that Daniel thinks he was temporarily deafened. And that, like, oh, are you okay? Okay, you're allowed. Okay, you're going to be. It's possible. I don't know. Which would maybe explain a little bit of, okay, I'll get back to him in a little bit. Maybe. I don't know.
I'm sure every father would want to hope that. So it's not out of the realm of
you
possibility,
would
right?
always veer towards that, and then when it starts to not be playing out that way, you do what you got to do.
Here's something is that we kind of framed it as he made his choice. When he pulled away from his son to fight the fire, that's when he made his choice.
Yeah.
It's never too late. And this is what's so sad, is that, he made that choice. But then he's cradling him right now. I think he feels that once he's made that choice, he made the choice. As opposed to, no, you still could have been a loving parent.
Yeah.
You still had a chance.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he fully makes the choice until he
sends him away.
Yeah, sends him away. I think that's the final
that's horrible
moment, because that's such a horrible decision. But like, he's trying, and we cut to the scene after he's stroking his hair that the ear doctor is coming in, and HW is kicking and screaming, and Daniel's trying to hold him for the doctor, and so trying to get him to kind of accept the situation, trying to fix him.
And now we're at the well, and Eli walks up. And the sense of dread and the sense of, the two combatants are coming together is really powerful. And Eli walks up looking very determined, comes face to face with Daniel and says,
"When do we get our money, Daniel?"
Oh, God damn it.
Okay.
Of all the times to come in,
Go. I was going to say something. I have nothing actually to say. I want to hear what you guys say.
I had to say, for those of you who are not capable of watching this, there were about 17 emotions that went across John Greber's face at that moment. Is that, do you think Eli purposely is not asking about HW. Like I am purposely doing that.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
I think so too.
For sure.
And what does Daniel do? But slaps him.
Just full on fucking slaps him. It's beautiful.
And this is the thing. So there was very little rehearsal for this scene. This is not choreographed. They did it twice. It's just full on. This is real. I mean, there's just nothing. There's no stage combatiness about this at all.
Mm-hmm.
This is Daniel Day-Lewis wailing on Paul Dano. Even the shot where he slaps him and Eli kind of goes down a little bit, and then he hits him from above, like swings down at him and is yelling at him.
Aren't you a healer and a vessel for the Holy Spirit? When are you coming over and make my son here again? Can't you do that?
And Eli's fighting back.
Let me bless the world is happening.
He drives him into the mud.
Oh, you owe the Church of the Third Revelation $5,000. One of the arrangements that we made.
He drags him by the hair into the mud, drives mud into his face. And I am sure that if you're Paul Dano, there's a moment where you become scared.
Sure. I mean, his screaming is just fantastic because he's almost regressing him to being a child himself. Yeah.
I would imagine if I'm cast as a bit part in a Paul Thomas Anderson movie and then boom, 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 nope, you're going to be probably the second biggest part as well. And you're working with Daniel Day-Lewis, who clearly had to sign on for this decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think your head hurts when the hair are pulling, but it's the greatest moment of your fucking life. You are probably giving in completely, scared a little bit probably, but I would hope that you're just giving it up. You're just letting him do his thing because you trust him. Because to me, it's such a scary scene for me.
Yeah.
It's really scary,
Right.
and I'm right there with you guys. This one leaves me a little speechless, shockingly, but this scene is just so powerful.
I also think the costume design is great here in this woman. I bring this up because he has unusually long feet. And when you're I don't know how big Daniel Lewis's feet actually is, but in this scene, the combination of the hat, which has the wide, has the big brim, and the feet. His feet stick out so far from his body that in essence he's I don't know what to describe him as, but he's this unusual looking creature in that moment. And he sees Eli walk. He watches Eli walk up to him. He watches him and he's like, it's almost that thing is like, oh, please say the wrong thing. Please fucking say the wrong thing. And he does. And Daniel just absolutely spanks him in essence.
Yeah.
And then buries him, and he says, I'm going to bury you on the ground, but buries him in the mud and what have you. It's a horrific scene because you're kind of in Daniel Plainview's camp for a majority of this first part of the movie. And then when this stuff starts to happen with HW, and then this moment where he's slapping it, you're like, oh man, he's going too far. This is going too far, you know?
I keep going back to this idea of the pillar of fire. This is another moment of a choice, because I think what happens is that he chooses as the most important thing in his life his anger at Eli over the love of his son.
Right.
Or maybe I'll put it slightly differently, is he can't deal with his son and the love he feels there. And so he redirects all his pain and all of that into anger at Eli.
Right.
By the way, what Karen said when we were watching this was she said, well, this is just two batshit crazy people going at each other.
Yeah.
Paul Dano, by the way, said, and partially because they didn't do a lot of rehearsal, is he never knew what Daniel Day-Lewis was going to do. He didn't know if it's going to be, sometimes it'd be big, sometimes it'd be small. He had no idea. And then we cut to Eli's family having dinner, and he has not cleaned the mud off of his body, which is literally his shame. And then he lays into his dad. He lashes out at him.
Cycle of violence.
Yeah, totally.
You are a stupid man, Abel. You've let someone come in here and walk all over us. You let him in and do his work here, and you are a stupid man for what we could have had.
what's so funny is Eli was in charge. His dad wasn't in charge.
Of course.
Eli made the deal. And then, this moment.
You're lazy and you're stupid. Do you think God is going to save you for being stupid? He doesn't save stupid people, Abel.
Do you think that sentiment, A, is one that Eli believes, and B, is one he would ever express in front of his congregation?
No. I think he's full of shit, and what he's really saying is, I was stupid, because he fucked it all up. His assumption that it was quid pro quo, whatever, that he was going to get. He thought he was dealing with a normal person and thought his Machiavellian streak was stronger than anyone's in that town, because it was, until Daniel got there. And so he fucked up. He did not navigate this in the way that he could have, because if he had really thought about it and served Daniel and said, how can I, basically came to him and played Daniel's game for the money for the church, he would have had the money, he would have had the church, they would be coexisting. But his hubris, his pride, his plan did not work out, and there's no one to blame but himself. Yeah. Now, his dad could have sold it to someone, but you're right. Eli was in charge of the entire exchange.
And he lunges across the table, gets on top of him, and it's really reminiscent of what Daniel Plainview did to him. His hands on his face. He's calling him stupid and weak. And he also blames Paul.
It was your stupid son. It was Paul who told him to come here. I know it. He went to him and he said, my stupid, weak father will give away his lots. Go and take him, and you let it happen.
But yeah, in essence, as John just said, the cycle of violence, the same thing that Daniel just did to Eli. Eli is doing to his father. So it's like the stronger always, taking it out on the weaker in his mind. And he attacks an old man, across his own table in front of his own family and mounts him. And grabs his face the way that Daniel Plainview was grabbing Eli's face, and then cries about Paul and says it was Paul and stupid man, stupid. And so it's an anger in Eli that Paul is still, Paul did one up him. Paul did get the best of him. Paul did put him in this situation where he got embarrassed. And then Paul left him to stew in it. And so he's so angry about it all.
More and more I'm going, man, there's themes of fathers and brothers in here.
Fathers and sons, yeah.
And what's interesting is it just occurred to me too. Well, we know that Abel beats Mary. Abel probably beat Eli and Paul too. I mean,
that's fair. Yeah.
So this is now the adult son dominating the abusive father,
Right.
Something tells me, I don't know why, but I feel like he didn't beat Eli. He did beat Paul. That's partially why Paul left. And I feel like, I don't know. It's one or the other, right? Either he snapped and then he no longer is, or he didn't. But either way, Eli is...
well, certainly when we meet Eli already has dominance over his family in terms of his religious power in some way. So that's been established for a while.
Right.
Workers are arriving, and we kind of follow this guy in a hat, and he goes up to Daniel and says,
I'm Henry Plainview. I'm from Fond du Lac. I'm your brother. From another mother.
By the way, I find it so, that phrase coming in this period is
doesn't
really
quite
weird.
land the same way, does it?
By the way, the actor is Kevin J. O'Connor. I think he's great in this movie.
I love that. I love this guy.
You heard about my strike? You just show up?
Our father's dead. Ernest died, I heard. I wanted to find you.
When?
3 months ago.
And he's got a letter from Annabelle, which is his sister. Clearly, Daniel is entirely cut off from his family. He doesn't know anything about what's going on back home.
You came all the way from Wisconsin to tell me this?
Coming from New Mexico, I've been there.
So, spoiler alert, this is not his brother. This is a guy who met maybe Daniel Plainview's brother, but this is not him. I think he lies. We've talked about lying many, many times on the Cine-Files. This is a good lie because he doesn't say, yes, I'm from Wisconsin. He says something else that sounds more truthful. And then the moment that he asks,
did you know about me?
That is a very sort of intimate and vulnerable question that a brother might ask. And then it's later, and we hear more about his story that he had been in jail.
I worked on a chain gang for 6 months building roads. That was a very hard time.
And what I like too is he asks Daniel questions. Daniel does not answer.
Are you married?
What were you in jail for?
And while this whole conversation is happening, HW is watching them. I think trying to figure out what's going on in HW's head in this part of the film is really difficult. It's later on, this scene is so upsetting to me, is Daniel pours a whole bunch of booze into milk and forces HW to drink it. Why is he doing this?
I don't know.
There's only one possible reason, and that's to make him fall asleep, to stop being a problem. At least for a few hours, stop being a problem in my world. Or stop whatever it is. Just turn off.
Yep. It's such a weird form of abuse. Force it, because there was a lot of booze. Forcing that much booze down a little kid's throat.
So, what do you want, Henry?
And Henry says two things. He says,
Nothing.
and then he says,
If you can spare something, I can work for you in any way.
and then Daniel calls him on it.
Just answer me directly. You say nothing, then you say you'd like to stay and work. And it's better. I just like to hear you say you'd like to be here.
I'd like to be here.
I think it's so interesting that in Daniel's mind, he just lost his son. You know what I mean? Like he feels that HW is now gone on some level. And at that moment, he replaces him with a brother. And we have Eli, whose brother Paul has gone away, but still has and we have the father who is dead, and Eli has the father who's alive, who he just dominated. There's a lot of stuff in all of this.
Yeah.
It's a lot of man stuff. There's a lot of man stuff.
Man, I want it so bad to be happy ending. Everything's over. He lives with his brother and he's really rich and they start an orphanage. Or whatever. But just something tells you this one ain't swinging that way.
No, that's the Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
That's the Spielberg movie. But this actor is, this sequence in the whole film, like the time that he has in the film, rather, he is incredible. To go toe to toe with Daniel Day like this, and he's so believable, and you buy it, and you think it's real, and you're, as a viewer, you're caught up in, the first time you see this, you're caught up in the tragedy of HW, and you're following along with HW, and then this guy shows up, and you think, okay, this could be something, this could be salvation, this could help him reconnect in some way, and it turns out to be a fucking lie, man.
Are you an angry man, Henry?
About what?
Are you envious? Do you get envious?
I don't think so, no.
You're right, John. This guy's performance is amazing because there's a gentleness in it. A very honest softness to him.
If you're a smart actor, you understand who's the boss of the movie, right? And so you go, how do I stand out in a way where I'm not doing what he's doing?
Yeah.
And the smart way, and the way that I think if he's in, because he strikes me as an intelligent actor. And Paul Thomas Anderson, I'm sure, had conversations with him, as did, I'm sure, Daniel Day-Lewis, but this idea of like, okay, what would the behavior have to be for someone who is trying to get in with Daniel Plainview? And that is to be submissive in a way, a docile, respond back in a stuttering, kind of a little bit of, just overwhelmed by the greatness of this man. So in a way, you're subconsciously kissing his ass so that he feels more comfortable around you. And Daniel is still questioning. He's like, "Are you angry? Are you envious?" And he says, "I have a competition inside me." And that's an honesty, an honest, vulnerable thing that he's surrendering in that moment. So he wants to make sure that his brother is not going to try to take something from him or try to take his power from him, like Eli is doing. So he wants to quiz him and make sure. And this guy responds so perfectly. He's like, "Oh, no, I don't think so." No, so he's very much not threatening Daniel Plainview, and this actor is very much not threatening Daniel Day-Lewis as the spotlight.
That's literally just what I was going to say. It's amazing how it parallels the actor and the other actor with the character and the other character.
Right.
And the thing that I think is that I might say it slightly differently, which is that it's a strange, confident submissiveness.
Yeah, yes.
It's not you're beating me down and I submit to it.
Right.
It's I choose to be submissive.
Yes.
That's where I want to be in that position. Okay, you just said the line. Let's get to it.
I have a competition in me. I want no one else to succeed. I hate most people.
The honesty in this moment is, I think he needed his brother. I think he's never spoken these words ever. He needed family. Someone he's putting trust in this guy in a way he never has before.
That part of me is gone. Working and not succeeding. All my failures has left me. I just don't care.
That's fascinating too. It's not saying he didn't have a competition in him. He's not saying he doesn't hate most people.
Right.
He's saying, I don't care anymore. And Plainview wants to find the connection.
Well, if it's in me, it's in you.
That's the most you are my brother. Like, I think he needs this guy to have, he feels so alone.
Yeah.
He needs this guy to understand this about him, you know?
Also,
says,
I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, he's being so real with him.
Mm-hmm.
I think Henry is being super real with him too. I mean, I'm believing what Henry is saying.
Yeah,
about,
me too.
about those things.
100%.
I do believe that's who he is.
Right.
There are times when I look at people and I see nothing worth liking. I want to earn enough money I can get away from everyone.
And that is exactly what he's going to do.
Exactly what he's going to do.
And it's not a good choice.
What will you do about your boy?
What Daniel Day-Lewis does in this next moment as he takes a long drink.
I don't know. Maybe it'll change. Has your sound come back to you? I don't know. Maybe no one knows that.
I am 100% now on he does love HW. He is filled with love for this kid.
I'm sold too.
Where's his mother?
I don't want to talk about those things.
And he goes back. His brain goes away from HW. I think he turns his back mentally. I think he closes the door and goes back to where he was before and says,
I see the worst in people, Henry. I don't need to look past seeing them to get all I need. I've built up my hatreds over the years, little by little. Having you here gives me a second breath. I can't keep doing this on my own with these people.
And I just lost my future heir apparent partner.
Yeah.
And slide on in, bro.
and then he laughs. And that laugh is, that's a lot. There's a lot in there, man. Well, and here's what's funny is like, I think maybe you guys have had this experience where you know what you should do, and you know that's what you need, and you maybe even know that will make me happier or more content, and you consciously do the opposite. You know, I've made those choices.
Oh
sometimes.
yeah, no comment on domestic squabbling and things like that, but yeah, been there quite some time. Know that what I'm about to say is going to stoke a fire that doesn't need to be stoked. We want to move on here, but I cannot stop it from coming out the throat and just shitting out all out of my mouth. And then exactly what I think is going to happen happens. And sometimes that happens. I just cannot stop. It's horrifying, but true. It's real.
Sure.
You know what occurs? You know what occurs to me? I really like. It's so funny because I'm an atheist, but ever since John, you said pillar of fire, I've been going back to you. You could. God gave him two chances. He gave him HW,
yeah,
and he gave him Henry,
right.
And both of them are lies.
Yeah,
and he can't get past the lies to realize that actually Henry kind of is his brother. Henry could have been his brother.
Yeah,
you
just
know?
Stop right there and move on with it, and he's your brother.
Right.
Yeah. And we're inside with HW, who lights a match, throws it on the ground where he's obviously left some kerosene or alcohol or something. Fire goes up, and it goes right to Henry's bag. What has happened? Why did this happen?
I think there's two reasons. I think one, he knows Henry's lying because he looked through the book and all that kind of stuff. And two, he sees Henry as a threat to this relationship with his father.
Yes, that's what I think. That's exactly what I think too. By the way, it is pretty strange that apparently in this world we have not invented writing. So he can't write his son a note, you know, like this lack of communication thing. It's not actually something that you couldn't have gotten past.
Right.
Yeah.
And now we cut to the train. And we saw them together on the train when he was a baby.
Right. Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Just have to go and have a word with the conductor. I'll be right back. You stay here. You understand? You stay here.
And he touches his face and he walks away. It is so fucking awful.
Yeah.
This thing that he does.
Yeah.
And he's walking away from the train, and the train starts moving, and HW is in the train and looks around, and the dawning realization of what his father has done. And he runs to, the door to get out, and there's Kieran there who grabs him and holds on to him. And then the train is gone. He's sent his kid away. Oh, man. And now we meet another oil guy, it's H.M. Tilford. And the first thing he asks is, how's your boy? And I love that Plainview says,
thank you for asking.
Is there anything we can do?
Thanks for asking is enough.
He doesn't actually answer the question. Yeah. Obviously, he doesn't want to talk about this. And these are the guys from Standard Oil. And they want to buy him out. And they're going, we'll make you a millionaire. You just got to sell out to us.
What else would I do with myself?
Are you asking me?
What else would I do with myself?
Take care of your son.
And I know what he's saying. What he's saying is, you're going to be a millionaire. Spend time with your family. Take care of your family. Raise your kid. He's not criticizing him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But that's not where this is going to go over.
Right.
Well, yeah, you're right. He's not criticizing him, but he is being a little patronizing, I think, just a tiny bit.
Daniel takes it that way because he sees it as anyone telling him what to do, he won't have it. Even if their intention is a good intention or their logic makes sense, he won't be dictated to.
And the big issue is shipping.
We don't dictate shipping costs. That's railroad business.
Oh, you don't own the railroads?
It's funny. I just, about a year ago, read a biography on Rockefeller. And it is absolutely true. This is how they crushed and bought out all the competition. Standard Oil is that they had deals with the railroad that all of their oil would ship way cheaper than everybody else's oil. So basically, they ruined all these other businesses until they had no choice but to sell out to Standard Oil, and that's how they became this massively huge monopoly.
Wow,
was controlling shipping costs.
Yeah, not to make a weird connection, but that's how kind of Vince McMahon did his thing in the WWE. He went into other territories and crushed them territory by territory by paying more money for their bigger stars and signing them to exclusive contracts only with the WWE because he could have distribution of their product and content on a wider scale on TV and on closed circuit. So yeah, this is how it was done.
You heard it here first. The very first Vince McMahon, John D. Rockefeller comparison ever in the history of the world, I believe, was on the Cine-Files. It's also, by the way, this is Amazon today. Amazon crushes everybody else by controlling shipping costs, by reducing they undercut everybody else's prices, and that's why they are a giant, huge monopoly today.
Where are you going to put it all? Build a pipeline, make a deal with Union Oil, be my guest. But if you can't pull it off, you've got an ocean of oil under your feet with nowhere to go. Why not turn it over to us? We'll make you rich. You spend time with your boy.
And there's a moment, and he says,
you just tell me how to run my family.
And they don't pick up on the fact that something weird just happened right away. And then Plainview says,
one night I'm going to come to you inside of your house, wherever you're sleeping, and I'm going to cut your throat.
He's so angry.
I mean, God.
Have you had this moment, by the way, where there's a thing going on and like suddenly someone escalates to a whole other level? And you're like, wait, whoa, what's happening here? Like, I didn't know we were talking about fighting. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I think you know the story, Steve.
I've witnessed this with you, John. And I've had this too, where I suddenly was like, whoa, hey, let's be friends.
Yeah, I thought we were busting balls. What happened?
Yeah.
It's like a scene out of The Sopranos.
And the performance from the guy, I forget who the actor is, it is so realistic. His sort of...
What are you talking about? Have you gone crazy, Daniel? I heard what you said. What did you say?
Tell me about my son.
Do you think that maybe there's a bit of a raw nerve about this kid he just put on a train and sent away?
Yeah. But I think also don't ever try to comment even on Daniel's life. Don't judge him ever.
Yeah.
Like, he's fine judging everyone else because he's constantly doing it. He's doing it with these guys right now.
Right.
It's not fair game to him to be turned around.
You know, just when you said that, John, what occurred to me, he is repressing the horribleness that he knows he is. You know what I mean? Like, and so anything that tends to expose that, he's actually extremely fragile and vulnerable in these areas.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
We're back with the realtor, and we hear again that something got hinted a long time ago, something about the bandy tract. And this is the guys that wouldn't sell to him early, that wanted to speak to him directly. And he says, okay, I'll go out and talk to them. And then we have just a very brief moment where he's talking to, his number one man about.
How big is his room?
Well, he's sharing with another boy.
Who?
An older boy, about 12. He's been there for a year, named Ballard.
How big is the room?
Oh, it's a fair size.
What's so crazy is that I think his name is Fletcher, asks if he's going with Henry, if Henry's going with him to meet Union Oil. And it's a totally small moment, but I think he's jealous. Like, how did this brother come in? And I'm supposed to be your right-hand man. And then we see Henry and Daniel surveying the land from the bandy track, heading all the way down to the ocean. Again, the redundant note I have is the cinematography is amazing.
Here's the Union Oil. 100 miles of pipeline and all the independent producers of this great state.
And then, what is to think one of the most surprising and bizarre transitions is that suddenly we're underwater. And we're swimming. Daniel and Henry are swimming around, and we start reminiscing.
There's that house in Fond du Lac that John Hollister built. Do you remember it?
And I love, this is both good writing and good acting. Henry's response is, And Daniel, again, continuing to reveal parts of himself in a way he's never done with anybody else.
I thought as a boy that was the most beautiful house I'd ever seen. I wanted it. I wanted to live in it. And eat in it. And clean it. And even as a boy, I wanted to have children to run around in it.
You can have anything you like now, Daniel. And you should. Where are you gonna build it?
Here, maybe, near the ocean.
Would you make it look like that house?
And this moment is so telling. He says,
I think if I saw that house now, it'd make me sick.
why would it make him sick?
I can only guess that he's, like we talked about or conjectured about, his father and his past. He wanted all these things as a kid. Like, as a kid, he wanted that. But now, he can't even be in that world anymore. He has to, he doesn't want to recreate the painful past or the lesser past. I'm not sure which one is more driving, but he's just like, no, now it's moving forward here. But really, it feels like what he's really trying to do here. Or maybe he's not. Maybe he hasn't quite gotten to the, I'm going to set up a trap for you. Yeah, I don't know if he has or if it's just happening, but it's a horrible moment in the movie for me.
Here's what I think's happening just about the house is, and your interpretations make perfect sense. But what I think it is when he was a kid and he was poor, he looked at this nice house in the neighborhood and went, that's what I want. That is what success looks like.
Right.
Now, in the position he's in now, those are the people he looks down upon. Those are the people he has hate for, that disgust him. And so that's why I think if he looked at that house now, it would make him sick.
Yeah, small minds, small visions, pathetic or lesser than.
Yeah. And because what he's saying is, my dream as a kid was dreaming of something which today disgusts me.
Yeah.
And then this next moment, because Henry says, hey, let's go get some liquor and get some girls. And Daniel, reminiscing about the town he grew up in, says,
Take him to the Peachtree Dams. I say get liquored up and take him to the Peachtree Dams.
And Henry just kind of says,
Yeah.
I think this is the moment.
Yeah.
I think this is the Fredo moment when he took Johnny Ola here all the time. Or Johnny Ola took me to this place.
Yeah.
I think this is the moment where he goes, how can you not know about the Peachtree Dance? That's not possible. And the look from Daniel, it hits him. It's literally, it's just like Al Pacino in that scene in Godfather 2. It hits him, and you could see all this stuff. And I love the framing of it because they're sitting in almost exactly parallel positions with Henry in the foreground. And Henry is deep in shadow because that's not really his brother, you know?
Yeah.
So he's in the dark. Daniel is in the light. And Daniel gets up and he walks away. The music is dissonant. It gets stronger. It builds. He heads into the light. He goes into the water and he's looking like almost right at camera. And this big wave comes up behind him and his face is just filled with anger. And I think the first time you see it, you're just like, what's happening?
Yeah.
You know, it takes you watching it more than once to go, oh shit, that's the moment.
Yeah.
And we hear laughing, and Henry is drunk, and we're obviously like at a whorehouse, and he's asking Daniel for money.
Have some money, please.
And finally, he counts out the money and hands it to him. Do you think he's already decided to kill Henry?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Or at least he's decided he's a fraud and he's out, but maybe he hasn't decided to kill yet, but he's negotiating that. The money feels like part of it.
I don't know if he's decided to kill him physically,
Right.
but he's certainly decided to kill him inside of his heart or any remote emotional connection to him for sure. And I think it was all just, this has been building with the last couple of scenes here with his responses to things. Do you know what I'm saying? He's pushing the boundaries, Henry is. He's trying to approach it from a simple point of view, and this man is anything but simple in terms of his intelligence. And that's where Henry eventually betrays himself.
Yeah. It's night. Daniel gets up. He has a gun. He looks down at Henry, who is passed out. I mean, this guy was seriously drunk. And I mean, I've been woken up when I had a night of partying. I've never been woken up quite like this.
I want you to tell me something.
What?
What's the name of the farm next to the hill house?
And he repeats it.
What was the name of the farm next to the hill house?
I can't remember.
Who are you?
And Henry doesn't deny it. I think that's part of why he's such a great character. He says,
I'll leave, Daniel.
Do I have a brother?
and this is where we find out that he met Daniel's brother. Daniel's brother died of tuberculosis.
Daniel, I'm your friend. I'm not trying to hurt you. Never. Just survive.
Does he think of Dan as his friend?
Yeah, I think so.
I do too.
Or at least he wants to be. He's certainly like, I'm just lukewarm water coming in here. I just want to get by. I can ally with you. It can be fine. I do believe that.
I think, you know how he came to get a job? I think he's gotten the job of brother, and he's going to do a good job.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, he's determined to be a good brother to Daniel Plainview.
Yeah.
And there's just this look from Plainview, and then he puts the gun up against his head and fires it.
Yeah.
It is so horrible. And the thing I was thinking as we've been talking is he's not killing him because he lied to him. He's killing him because he gave him his trust, because Henry is now the holder of his secrets, of his intimate self, and he can't be allowed to survive.
Right.
Daniel never gives, never shares, never opens like that. And he was also deceived in an emotional way.
Yeah.
There's no path to going back for him.
Yeah.
He digs a grave and puts the body in it. And the moment, by the way, that he pushes the foot down into the grave is just so brutal. we see that the diary is partially burnt, and he's looking through it, and he's drinking, and he just is overwhelmed with emotion and weeps.
Yeah. I mean, this is such an interesting, like, he's murdered somebody.
Yes.
He's flat out murdered somebody. He sent his son away, but there's for all his madness, there is a desperate desire to connect. Is it overtly desperate? No. But when it's betrayed to go all the way to murdering somebody, and somebody who probably would have just kind of walked away and never darkened his door again, was an interesting decision to make of where he's at. And the tears are coming, I think, from that deep place of like, I have created this thick skin to survive in this world, but I'm lonely and I'm alone. And even when I think a family member shows up, they're lying to me.
Right.
And like the betrayal of it all.
Do we agree that this is the first murder that Daniel has committed?
Ooh, good question.
I don't think it is. I think he had that gun at the silver mine. I think he used it. I have no evidence for this whatsoever.
Yeah.
But that's what I think.
Okay.
Here's what I find really interesting is he has a false son, and in a way the false son's who he puts his love into, and in a way the false son's deafness, the accident, is the betrayal, and so he pushes that false son away, and then he has a false brother who he puts his love into, discovers he's false, and has to destroy him.
And ironically, both of these are repairable problems.
Yep.
Both of these are relationships that can thrive the rest of us. He could have made both work and actually had a super rich life.
Yep.
That's the pain point here, is that he can't see shit. He cannot see this. And it's just, nope, turn off that faucet, moving on.
And frankly, he could have just given Eli the $5,000. I mean, just because he doesn't like the guy or respect the guy or thinks he's a charlatan doesn't mean that his life would have actually been better if he had just made the deal. So here Daniel had everything he really needed for a happy life, including a son that loved him and a brother that, albeit a fake brother, actually, I think, really cared about him. And instead of having those people with him, he's a murderer who is weeping uncontrollably and drinking himself into a stupor all alone on the beach. And I think we should leave Daniel Plainview on that beach as we end part 2 of our exploration of There Will Be Blood with our very special guest, Emmy Award-winning sound editor John Greber. As always, we'd love to hear what you think. Just visit us on Facebook, do a search for The Cine-Files. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cine_Files, on Instagram at The Cine-Files Podcast. You can subscribe to the show in all the usual places, including Apple Podcasts, where we'd love to get your reviews, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, where we love responding to your comments. You can buy or stream There Will Be Blood along with every other movie we've ever reviewed on our website, cinephiles.net. You can support the show on patreon.com/thecinephiles, where you can hear our weekly shorts and even suggest a movie that we do. And as always, you can follow me on Twitter at SRMorris, on Instagram at SRMorris1. You can follow John at The Roca Says and listen to his other great podcasts, The Top 10 Show and The Geek Buddies. And of course, you've got to subscribe to his YouTube channel. And if you want to follow our very special guest, John Greber, his handle is Split Surround. And that's it for this week, but we will be back to conclude our exploration of There Will Be Blood right here on The Cine-Files.